Bernie Sanders came out with a new student loan debt plan. He unveiled it along with a few other members of the Congress. I believe it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Pramila Jayapal, a couple of others. So they were the main characters in pushing this legislation, and it's a pretty big deal. And Bernie, he kind of torpedoed it. He kind of got it kind of more out in the open there, as far as making sure that it obviously gets a lot more attention in the press. And considering the fact that he's basically one of the most, if not the most prominent politician right now, especially since he's running for president, it's a pretty big deal that he kind of proposed this and made sure that he's also making it part of his plan as running for president. So if he were to become president, this is something I would think pretty much he would push for the same exact thing he's proposing as legislation in Congress and the Senate. He would try and make it a main part of his platform if he were to become president of the United States. So let's check out the CBS News article here, and I'm going to be playing you guys a clip of Bernie talking, kind of giving like a statement on the matter. So here is an article from CBS News. It's titled "Bernie Sanders Wants to Erase $1.6 trillion in student debt by Taxing Wall Street." So it gives a couple bullet points here. It points out how Bernie Sanders is proposing to erase the nation's $1.6 trillion in outstanding student debt by taxing Wall Street transactions. A tax of 0.5% on all stock trades and smaller fees on bonds and derivatives could raise $2.4 trillion over a decade, Sanders says. Sanders' plan would earmark $48 billion to pay for free tuition at state colleges and universities. So let's check out let's read the article first, and then I'll play the video for you guys. So it says, Senator Bernie Sanders said he has a plan to wipe out the $1.6 trillion in student debt owed by more than 40 million Americans. Tax Wall Street transactions such as stock and bond trades. The proposal is the latest from a Democratic presidential candidate that aims to tackle the growing problem of student debt, which has been blamed for blunting the economic prospects of millions of Americans. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Sanders' rival for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination in April, issued a plan to forgive student debt for college grads by adding an annual 2% tax on wealth above $50 million and a 1% tax on wealth more than $1 billion. So I just wanted to stop here for a second and comment on that specific paragraph, especially where it points out Elizabeth Warren wanting to do a 2% tax on wealth above 50 million. And then I didn't even know about the 1% tax on wealth more than $1 billion. That's a little weird. Why would the tax on 50 million, why would it be a higher tax on 50 million and a lesser tax on 1 billion? That's strange. Anyway, so I think Elizabeth Warren's plan is not even close to as good as Bernie Sanders' plan, especially when you consider the fact that, first of all, Bernie Sanders he already proposed a student loan debt plan in 2015, I believe it was, and maybe even 2014, and he also pushed for statewide legislation for student debt relief in the state of New York. That's something that he did with Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York, and that was a pretty big win for him at the time. I think it was in 2017, I believe, and that was a pretty big deal at the time. So this is something Bernie has been pushing for consistently, and the fact that Elizabeth Warren comes out and tries to push for that it's great. That's nice. But the fact that she wants to do a 2% tax above people that are making $50 million, that's a lot. I've mentioned this before. I mentioned this on past podcasts when I was covering the issue, covering like Elizabeth Warren and kind of her various like issues that she's running on. And I pointed out that the 2% tax on wealth above 50 million is just not enough. That is way too much. That is giving way too much leeway to people that are super rich. $50 million is a lot of money. And when you're deciding to put a 2% tax on people that are making that much money, I mean, you got to go a hell of a lot lower than that. You should be taxing people at 5 and 10 million. Maybe even, I'd say maybe even lower, you could say than that. But $50 million, that's a lot of money. So like I said, I think it was last week's podcast, if you're going to be doing a 2% tax on people that are making 50 million, anybody that's right under 50 million at 49 or 49.9 million, they're not going to be taxed with a 2% wealth tax. So to fund the student debt relief. So that's just not good enough. Sorry, Elizabeth Warren's plan is just way too neoliberal and way too centrist for me. I'm sorry, that just doesn't do it. And Bernie's plan is a hell of a lot better if you look at the details. So let's go further here and read the rest of the article here. It says, while the plans differ on how they would raise the money to pay off the country's outstanding student debt, both proposals seek to boost the middle class by erasing a financial burden that can make it tougher for families to afford a home or car. Since the end of the recession a decade ago, the nation's outstanding student loan debt has more than doubled, rising from $700 billion in 2009 to $1.6 trillion today. It says, I think this is Bernie Sanders quoting him. It says, all Americans will get the college education or job training they need while having all student debt forgiven. Sanders, a Vermont independent, said in a Monday tweet, we bailed out Wall Street in 2008. It's time to tax Wall Street's greed to help the American people. Sanders said his plan would also provide $48 billion in state funding to provide free tuition at state colleges and universities. So the next part here is titled, it's kind of halfway through the article, it has a little bit of title here. It says Taxing Wall Street, and it says Sanders said he would raise the money to pay off the nation's student debt by adding a 0.5% tax on stock trades or 50 cents on every $100 of stock, as well as a 0.1% fee for bond trades and an 0.005% fee on derivatives trades. His campaign estimates the taxes could generate $2.4 trillion over a decade. Dollars, obviously. It says taxing financial trades isn't a new idea. The U.S. imposed a tax on all stock trades until 1966, when the levy was eliminated. Other countries also raised money through taxing stock trades, including the UK and Germany, Sanders noted. Meanwhile, the cost of a college education has far outstripped wage growth in recent decades, leaving many families struggling to foot the bill. Because a college degree provides a boost to lifetime earnings, students and their families often opt to take on thousands in debt in hopes of earning more down the road. But that can leave them struggling to repay their loans as they are getting started in their careers. Not only the young are weighed down by student debt, Americans aged 60 and older owe more than $86 billion in unpaid college loans, while 40% of those 65 and older are in default. Wow. According to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Sanders said the plan would also help current and future students by easing the financial struggle many face once they're in college. Almost half of college students report struggling with hunger and the cost of housing, for instance. In the richest country in the history of the world, students should not have to starve in order to get an education, noted a statement on Sanders' campaign site. So that's great. All this, the stuff that's being pointed out in this article, and Bernie's overall plan is awesome. I think that's the perfect way to tackle student loan debt. This is an issue that has gone on way too long without being addressed, and it's great to see that the most popular politician in the country has decided to grab the bull by its horns and not only tackle student loan debt, but also going after Wall Street for all their various derivatives trading and, kind of just overall corporate greed and how they, obviously they are so deregulated by, Trump and the conservatives and Republicans that they're allowed to do all the different kind of derivatives trading and all the, all that stuff they want and put puts and holds and calls and stuff and on their different transactions. Betting and all that, doing kind of betting on stocks to fall and then making money off of that and stuff. Yeah, so there's a bunch of shit that goes on, in the back door aside from just derivatives trading and stocks and bonds and all that stuff. So he's definitely doing the right thing, and I wanted to play you guys the clip of him giving his statement, and then it's just in the in front of Capitol Hill here. So I'll play this for you guys, and then we'll talk about this a little bit more on the other side.
That keep our society going. In other words, we will make a full and complete education a human right in America to which all of our people are entitled. This means making public colleges, universities, and HBCUs tuition-free and debt-free by tripling the work-study program, expanding Pell Grants, and other financial incentives. Today, we are entering a proposal which will allow every person in this country to get all of the education that they need to live out their dreams because they are Americans. Further, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, it is simply not acceptable that our younger generation, through no fault of their own, will have a lower standard of living than their parents, more debt, lower wages, and less likelihood of owning their own homes. That is why this proposal completely eliminates student debt in this country and ends the absurdity of sentencing an entire generation, the millennial generation, to a lifetime of debt for the crime of doing the right thing, and that is going out and getting a higher education. 10 years ago, the United States government bailed out Wall Street after their greed, their recklessness, and their illegal behavior drove us into the worst recession in modern history. Today, the major Wall Street banks are larger than ever, their profits are soaring, and their CEOs receive huge compensation packages. Our proposal, which costs $2.2 trillion over 10 years, will be fully paid for by a tax on Wall Street speculation, similar to what exists in dozens of countries around the world. The American people bailed out Wall Street. Now it is time for Wall Street to come to the aid of the middle class of this country. This Wall Street tax will have the added benefit of controlling Wall Street recklessness and reducing the likelihood of another major economic crash. In 1944, as World War II was coming to an end, the U.S. government did the right thing and passed the GI Bill, which made higher education free to all of those who served in the armed forces. That act not only improved the financial well-being of millions of men and women, but it also laid the groundwork for a great expansion of the American middle class. In the 1960s and 1970s, the federal government and state governments invested heavily in higher education, with the result that college tuition was virtually free for millions of young people. 40 years ago, a federal Pell Grant paid for nearly 80% of tuition, fees, room and board at a four-year college. Well, unfortunately, things have changed over the years and changed in a bad way. Today, it will cost over $21,000 each and every year to attend some of these very same schools which 50 years ago were virtually free. Today, Pell Grants cover only 30% of college expenses. And here are the results of federal and state higher education cutbacks. Today, the average college senior graduates with about $30,000 in student debt, and 1 out of 6 seniors will graduate with over $50,000 in debt. The situation is even worse for African American and Latino families. And at a time when we desperately need more doctors and dentists and nurses, those who are graduating medical school and dental school and nursing school are finding themselves in some cases with $300,000 or $400,000 in debt. And here is a sad truth, another sad truth regarding this whole crisis. Many students are dropping out of college, not getting their degrees, and yet they still find themselves with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Let's be clear. The millennial generation was told that the only way they would get the good jobs available is if they received a college education. Unfortunately, that turned out to be bad advice. It was wrong. Since 2000, the cost of attending a public college has nearly doubled. Meanwhile, the bottom 60% of college graduates earn less money than those who graduated college did 19 years ago. And wages for the average college graduate have stagnated. Today, 34% of Americans 25 and older have a college degree, but only 26% of them in our country, 26% of those jobs require a college education. The result is that many millions of young people today are forced to work at low-wage jobs. Their standard of living is going down while they're struggling to pay off their outrageously high level of student debt. Bottom line is we should not be punishing people for getting a higher education. It is time to hit the reset button. Under the proposal that we introduced today, all student debt would be canceled in 6 months. By taking this action, we not only provide immediate financial relief to 45 million Americans who have $1.6 trillion in debt, but we will be improving the entire economy. According to a recent study, canceling all student debt would add an estimated $1 trillion to our economy over the next decade and create up to 1.5 million jobs. Let me just conclude by giving you a tale of 2 crises. 10 years ago, because of their greed and illegal behavior, Wall Street banks were on the verge of collapse, and the United States Congress, with taxpayer assistance, came to their aid. Well, now we got millions and millions of families in this country who are struggling with outrageous levels of student debt. And maybe instead of just worrying about Wall Street, we start worrying about those families and that generation and give them a break.
That's right.
So this is for those families, this is for those young people, this is for the economy, and this is for justice. And that is what we are proposing. Thank you all very much.
So that's a great speech from Bernie. He, as usual, gets into all the details, points out all the, the specificities of the plan, talks about how, people, the younger generation, have suffered so much, and they don't deserve to have to go through this. And one of the key facts there was pointing out how, we had all, I think it was mentioned in the article too, how, we had all this money to, we had all this money to bail out Wall Street, but we don't have enough money to go bail out, the people that are dealing, so they're just like going to school to get an education and then getting punished for it, essentially. So we don't have enough money to bail them out, but we have enough money to bail out the super rich, banks that not only corrupted our system, poisoned our system, but also demanded that we save their asses from all the from all the things that they did that fucked up our country. So what a nerve of those people, you know? Those people, the last thing they should be, be getting is bailouts. They don't deserve it. And notice how, like, whenever small businesses that go out of business, or people that go bankrupt for for no reason. So basically, when they go bankrupt, when they shouldn't be going bankrupt, when are they getting bailed out? Those people never get bailed out. When they get screwed over by the system somehow, they don't get bailed out. But then when the big banks that are screwing other people over, they get bailed out right away. No problem. You got to do that one right away, because you have to save the asses of the super rich so they can continue screwing us over. So there's a couple of urban legends or lies, or whatever you want to call it, misinformation out there regarding Bernie's plan. And it is about, it's obviously, addressing his his student debt plan. And they're talking about how one of the main ones that I remember that I've heard multiple times from not only mainstream media outlets, but also just people that despise Bernie Sanders. They're saying, well, Bernie Sanders' plan is gonna help people that so rich kids that have student debt. So all these rich kids that are racking up all this student debt, they're going to get bailed out essentially by Bernie's plan, because they're going to get their student debts paid off. That doesn't make any fucking sense, because if anybody knows anything about math, you know that when somebody is already rich, they have enough money to pay off their student debt with their own money. So let's just say if that kid is rich, or his parents are rich, or whoever, if that person has money, if they're super rich, what do they need to get bailed out by a student debt plan for? Why would a student debt plan be helping rich people that can already cover themselves with their own money? So they don't need to be going. They're never actually going to be in any kind of debt. So that just doesn't make any sense. It's just a bullshit lie put out by smear merchants and misinformers who just want to throw a monkey wrench into Bernie's plans and pretend like he stands for something, or he's pushing something that he's not actually pushing for. And speaking as somebody that had student debt and was paying it off, at some point I got help from my parents, to the point where they helped me pay off the rest of my student loans, the student loans that I had, because I was paying them off for about a year or so. Was it about a year? I'd say 9 months to about a year, and then they ended up paying off the rest of it. So, and my parents aren't rich. We're not necessarily my family. My parents they're not necessarily rich. So it's not. I'm not the same as these, people who are rich that are supposedly getting bailed. Supposedly getting their student debts canceled. No way. Those are people that can pay. They can pay for school. They can go to any kind of rich, expensive school, Harvard, Yale, whatever, Princeton, all these really, Ivy League type schools. They're not going to get bailed out by Bernie's student debt relief plan. So, yeah, that's ridiculous. And again, speaking as somebody that did get help from my parents, and my parents not being rich, trust me, I mean, it took them a while to finally help me out with that, and that was understandable, because because obviously they didn't have the money yet, and then once they accumulated the money, they had a little bit of money put aside. They helped me out, and they ended up helping me with that, and I didn't have to deal with that anymore. So I didn't have to have that burden. Other students obviously have that burden, and they have a hell of a lot more debt than I ever did. That's for damn sure. And I also wanted to point out one little thing, one little noteworthy thing that happened a while back. Joe Biden, who was obviously one of the candidates running in 2020, he in 2000, I don't know if it was 2016 or 7. I think it was after he left his vice presidency. So I think it was in 2017 or something. He was giving some sort of like town hall speech, sit down interview or something on a stage, and I guess, I don't know, he got asked about the issue of what millennials are going through and young people, what they're dealing with right now. And he didn't basically say it, he said it. He just went out and said, I don't have any sympathy or empathy for, all these young kids that are going through what they're going through. Give me a break. stop complaining. Essentially, he was basically telling them to just, stop fucking whining. Don't be such, little bitches, and don't complain about your problems. My problems were a lot worse than yours. Give me a break. So Biden's just a prick, So just to give you a little bit of a juxtaposition, comparing Bernie Sanders, a little bit of a contrast between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, two people obviously that are running in this race for the presidency, and basically the two front runners. Notice how one front runner says one thing and he's being a complete dick about it, and the other guy is, not only is he sympathetic towards those people, but he's putting out plans that will help them. So it's a clear, there's a clear, difference. It's night and day there between two front runners, and honestly, one of them shouldn't even be a front runner. And the only reason that he has the front runner status is because he's a former vice president, and he has name recognition. That's it. And that's the only thing Biden has. Other than that, he doesn't have shit to go based on.